Hello and welcome to another edition of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. It's episode 51 tonight on this edition and March 8th, 2023. I'm your host, Jason DiCanio, and tonight on our show we have a strategy type guessing game for two players based on ruled grids on which each player's fleet of warships are marked. The locations of the fleets are concealed from the other player. Players alternate turns calling shots at other players' ships, and the objective of the game is to destroy the opposing player's fleet. Well, it's known worldwide as a pencil and paper game, which dates from World War I. It was published by various companies as a pad and pencil game in the 30s, and was released as a plastic board game by Milton Bradley in the 60s. To be exact, 1967. And the game has spawned electronic versions, video games, smart device apps, and a film. What game are we talking about tonight? Well, we're talking about Battleship right here on Jay's Retro Toys and Games, coming up next right here on YouTube. I'm Jason DiCanio, welcoming you to another edition of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Hope you had a great weekend. And just to let you know now, we're only on twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays. So that kind of limits us to 2 toys and 2 games, as you probably know. But in the meantime, gives you a little bit of a chance to catch up and look at all the other stuff that we've got out there. We didn't do so hot with Perfection, but I think in the later part of the time when we archive it, it will have more of exposure to everybody. But I guess it's one of those games that just needs a little bit more explanation. I'm not sure, but it's out there, and if you need to re-look at it or re-listen to it, go right ahead. It's available for playback at any time. If you haven't joined the YouTube channel, please do so. We're at 24 subscribers, and we'd love to have you as part of our Retro Toys and Games family. Okay? But tonight we're looking at, on this March 8th, 2023, this Wednesday, the history of Battleship. Okay? So the game of Battleship is thought to have its origins in the French game L'Attaque, played during World War I, although parallels have also been drawn to E.I. Horseman's 1890 game Basilinda, and the game is said to have been played by Russian officers before World War I. The first commercial version of the game was Salvo, published in 1931 in the United States by the Starex Company. Other versions of the game were printed in the 30s and 40s, including the Strathmore Company's Combat, the Battleship game, Milton Bradley's Broadsides, a game of naval strategy, and Maurice L. Friedman's Warfare Naval Combat. Strategy Games Corporation produced a version called Wings, which pictured planes flying over the Los Angeles Coliseum. All of these early editions of the game consisted of pre-printed pads of paper. Then in 1967, Milton Bradley introduced a version of the game that used plastic boards and pegs. Conceived by Ed Hutchins, play was on pegboards using miniature plastic ships. And in 1977, Milton Bradley also released a computerized electronic battleship, a pioneering microprocessor-based toy capable of generating various sounds. Electronic Battleship was designed by Dennis Wyman and Bing McCoy. It was followed in 1989 by Electronic Talking Battleship, In 2008, an updated version of Battleship was released using hexagonal tiles. In the updated version, each player's board contains several islands on which captured men figurines can be placed. Ships may be placed only around the islands and only in the player's half of the board. When the movie Battleship was released, the board game reverted to the original 1967 style. The 2008 updated version is still available as Battleship's Islands. Battleship was one of the earliest games to be produced as a computer game, with a version being released for the Z80 Compucolor in 1979. Many computer editions of the game have been produced since. In Clubhouse games for the Nintendo DS, Battleship is known as Grid Attack. It's played on a 7x7 grid and includes slight variations such as 4-player gameplay and various ship sizes and shapes. Versions of Battleship appear as applications on numerous social networking services. Battleship was also part of Hasbro Family Game Night for the PlayStation 2 and the Wii, as well as the Xbox 360, with the Xbox Live Arcade. These alter the rules, including the size of the grid, 8x12 in the NES version, 8x8 in the Game Boy version, the size of the ships, and it's common to feature a submarine that takes up a single square, and special shot missiles for each ship. For example, in the NES version, the cruiser has a 5-shot missile which strikes 5 squares in an X pattern on the grid in one turn. Submarine tracking sonar and aerial reconnaissance to spot ships are also features. A mini-game version of Battleship was used in the third season of the Hub's Family Game Night, which uses a 5x5 grid, and the first team to sink 3 ships wins the game. In 2012, the military science fiction action movie Battleship was released, which was inspired by the Milton Bradley board game. And a version of Battleship based on the movie was released in which one side had alien ship playing pieces. In the 1973, a spin-off version was released under the name Subsearch. Employing a 3-dimensional play area, battleships drop depth charges on submarines hidden on a multi-level board. In one episode of the Amazon Prime Video show The Grand Tour, presenters Richard Hammond and James May played a game of Battleship with 2 cranes, colored red and green, and 20 Revive vehicles as missiles. The ships ranged from cars to camper vans. So the game is played on 4 grids, 2 for each player, and the grids are typically square, usually 10 by 10. And the individual squares in the grid are identified by letter and number. On one grid, the player arranges ships and records the shots by the opponent. On the other grid, the player records their own shots. Before play begins, each player secretly arranges their ships on the primary grid, and each ship occupies a number of consecutive squares on the grid, arranged either horizontally or vertically, and the number of squares for each ship is determined by the type of ship. The ships cannot overlap. That means only one ship can occupy any given square in the grid. The types and numbers of ships allowed are the same for each player. These may vary depending on the rules. And the ships should be hidden from players' sight, and it's not allowed to see each other's pieces. The game is a discovery game which players need to discover their opponent's ship positions. The 1990 Milton Bradley version of the rules specify the following ships. You have a carrier that has 5 points, Battleship 4, Cruiser 3, Submarine 3, and the Destroyer 2. Then in 2002, Hasbro renamed the Cruiser to Destroyer, taking 3 squares, and introduced a new 2-square ship called the Patrol Boat. Now, after the ships have been positioned, the game proceeds in a series of rounds. In each round, each player takes a turn to announce a target square in the opponent's grid which is to be shot at. The opponent announces whether or not the square is occupied by a ship. If it is a hit, the player who is hit marks their own or ocean grid, or marks this on their own ocean grid with a red peg in the pegboard version. The attacking player marks the hit or miss on their own tracking or target grid with a pencil, marking in the paper version of the game, or the appropriate color peg in the pegboard version, red for hit, white for miss. in order to build up a picture of the opponent's fleet. When all of the squares of a ship have been hit, the ship's owner announces the sinking of the carrier, submarine, cruiser, destroyer, patrol boat, or the titular battleship. If all of the players' ships have been sunk, the game is over and their opponent wins. If all ships of both players are sunk by the end of the round, the game is a draw. In 1931 Salvo edition of the game, players target a specified number of squares at one time, and all of the squares are attacked simultaneously. A player may initially target 5, one for each unsunk ship, squares per turn, and the amount of shots decreases when one of the player's ships are lost. In other variants of this mechanic, the number of shots allowed to fire each turn may either be fixed at 5 for the whole game, be equal to the number of unsunk ships belonging to the player, or be equal to the size of the player's largest undamaged ship. The opponent may either call the result of each shot in turn or simply announce the hits or misses. Example, 2 hits and 3 misses, leaving their opponent to work out the consequences of the salvo. In the modern Milton Bradley rules for Battleship, salvo is listed as a variation for more experienced players, with the number of shots being equal to the number of ships that the firing player has remaining. One variant of Battleship allows players to decline to announce that a ship has been sunk, requiring their opponent to take further shots in order to confirm that an area is clear. Another variant of the rule allows a player to move one of their ships to a new uncalled location every 4th or 5th move. And a variant popular in the United Kingdom is for each player to also have 5 mines. That's M-I-N-E-S. These occupy 1 square each and are placed on the board in the same manner as the ships. When a player's guess hits a mine on an opponent's board, it destroys anything in that square and the 8 immediately surrounding squares on the board of the player making the guess. Then you can also see the video game from 1993. There was a 1996 video game. Then you have Battleship Surface Thunder, which is a PC game. There's a film, a puzzle, another video game, another one called Mugwump, which is a 1973 computer game, and other variations and references that resort to Battleship. But 1967 is when it all started for Milton Bradley, and a game that's been around for over 50 years and still played to this day in many variations, from the classic to the talking to the PC game. And what a game it is to pass the time away. In fact, you could buy a Battleship game, send one to your friend across the country in California, and you can play variants or over the phone, just like chess, for all that matters, and have fun at the same time talking to your friends. You'd probably eat up a lot in battery on your phone, but knowing that you would play a little bit here, play a little bit there, it's a good time, good way to pass the time and see how your friend is doing. So I think that's a pretty good way of taking a classic game like that and, beefing it up a little bit more. So with that, we have come to the end of our show. Well, on this Friday's edition, we're going to look at some more things here. So let's see what we can find. Oh, we didn't do My Little Pony, did we? I don't think we have. Okay. So that's going to be next up on our list here. I haven't seen anything for a girl's toy yet, so I'm looking at the videos right now, and I don't see My Little Pony, but so we really need to do that one. Yeah, we've done Pound Puppies, we've done Care Bears, Cabbage Patch Kids, Strawberry Shortcake, the Barbie doll, of course. So My Little Pony is going to be coming up next this Friday on episode 52 of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Should be fun. Hope that we got a lot of history to cover on this one here, as the franchise has been up almost since, what, for the television, it's been 1981 was the first year that it came out by Hasbro, but was created by Bonnie Zacherle. Zacherle. So that should be pretty interesting as we look at our continuation of Retro Toys and Games. So we'll see you then. For all of us here at Jay's Retro Toys and Games, I'm Jason DeCanio. Remember, always be honest, be real, and keep it simple, stupid. Kiss. We'll see you on Friday. Have a good night. Bye-bye.